Hi, Richard Wright, and first you need to turn on the Mighty, and assuming you've installed the Wi-Fi board and configured it according to, I've set mine up so that the Wi-Fi on the mount broadcasts its own Wi-Fi network, and then I'm going to connect to that with the iPad. So there it is, called Mighty Mount. I'm going to tell it to join it anyway because it doesn't have any internet. Now, one thing you can do to double check to make sure your connection is good is hit the little I next to the Wi-Fi name and make sure you have an IP address and a subnet mask. Now, again, according to the instructions, we had to set this up as a static IP address and everything, so we should be good to go. I'm going to open up TheSky HD, and I'm going to show you that the mount selected is Paramount Mighty here under settings, and then I'll press the scope button, and I put in the IP address that the mount is configured for, and I'm going to connect now. And it takes a few seconds. There we go, and we're connected. And first thing we need to do on a Paramount that's been powered up is home the mount. So I'll hit the home button, and you may hear in the background the mount moving around. Now you can't really move the mount or do anything until you've homed it. That just initializes the control system so it knows the orientation of the right ascension and the declination to axis. And I was quite a bit off, but it generally only takes a few seconds, far less than a minute. See, one of the axes has quit moving. Almost. Almost. And there's the music from the mount. One more axis. Come on. Almost there. There we go. Now we're homed. And you'll see the home mount button went away because it is homed. And there's a polar alignment button. At this point in time, you can click or touch anywhere on the screen, and these arrow buttons will move the mount around. You can also change the speed at which the mount moves, and so move it up and down and so forth. But first we want to do a polar alignment, a rough polar alignment. Now this has step-by-step instructions. First it tells you make sure the mount is level as possible. Our Paramount tripods, the Mighty tripod has bubble levels on it, plus the mount has a bubble level on it as well. For visual use, this doesn't have to be precise within 10 arc seconds or so. And for imaging, it depends on your imaging goal. For very wide field imaging, you don't need to be too close on polar alignment. Closer the better, of course. So as level as you can make the mount, the better your initial alignment is going to be. Now, of course, for imaging, you're liable to be using a desktop or TheSky on a box, and you'll be doing a T-point to further refine your polar alignment. So assuming our mount is level, we go next. Make sure your altitude is close to your current altitude, and click next again. And it's going to tell you, okay, basically when this screen disappears, slew somewhere and center the scope, and then click the sync button. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. Now it's very important when you slew to a bright star or an object, when you move the mount, you do not use those buttons on the front screen. You're going to use only the azimuth and the altitude adjustment on the mount. Depending on the tripod, you may be able to actually twist the mount side to side if your azimuth is significantly out. But just to show you what that looks like, don't hit cancel. Click done to say you're ready. And you can actually do this during the day. Let's get our screen up here. And we've got the Sun and Mars, and Venus and Jupiter are up. Let's tell it to slew to Venus. And we'll slew to Venus. And well, we got to do a meridian flip, so it's going to flip all the way over. So just a little word here in the middle of this. Venus and Jupiter, for the purposes of the video demonstration, were conveniently placed. However, they're almost overhead, and objects that are right overhead are not the best choice for doing a rough polar alignment. So in the field, you would want to try to pick an object that's low and close to the horizon. somewhat off the horizon. I use the sun as the sun is setting, or the planets, they're along the ecliptic, but not when they're overhead. Low to the east and west will give you very good azimuth placement on your polar alignment, and objects that are low to the north and south will give you both azimuth and altitude adjustment. Sometimes the altitude is not as critical because if you're level and you have the altitude set on the mount correctly, you're not going to need to do too much. But if you travel around and your latitude and longitude is changing a lot, or you just want to be safe, again, pick something a little bit lower on the horizon for better results. Now, the number of ways to do this, you could have an eyepiece in the scope. If you're setting up with the camera, you can't, with the DSLR, you can look through the camera, but with a CCD camera, you can't. What I do is I kind of sight down the VersaPlate like it's a gun sight, and it does take some practice to get good at sighting along that and getting it straight. Sometimes I'll use the sun, and I'll use one of those little sun spotters that they use on solar scopes, which gets the scope pointing directly at the sun. But we're going to make our adjustments moving the mountain, again, not with these arrow buttons. Do not use these arrow buttons on the iPad. Do not use the hand controller or the joystick plugged into the mount. We're going to move the mount physically side to side. Use the knobs to jack it up and down, or to move it left and right, or twist it, and get it centered on your object, Jupiter, as well as possible. And you do need to be selected an object. You see, actually this says none. This is a good learning example here, none. I don't want nothing to be selected. I wanted to select Jupiter. So let's select Jupiter. And because let's say, okay, slew. Yeah, it's off a little bit. Fat fingers. Well, there you go. There's an easy mistake to make when you're doing this. So Jupiter is selected, and I'm gonna use my VersaPlate or some way of sighting down the scope, eyepiece or whatever, to make sure I'm pointed at Jupiter. And then I click the sync button, which is in the upper right hand corner next to it's between abort and slew. I click sync, and it's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to synchronize the mount on Jupiter? It's another good place. If it said synchronize the mount on unknown or touch spot, then you're in trouble. So make sure again that you're on an object, you're lined up with that object, and the only reason it has to be an object is because we know the coordinates of that object, and we know the mount is pointing at that object, and therefore we know the coordinates of the mount. So I click OK, yes, and we are now done. I can slew wherever I want. I found with visual observing and a wide field eyepiece, I get good results all over the sky. For photography, for short exposures, I'm often very close for short exposures. Or if I'm guiding, I'm close enough the guider doesn't have to work too hard. I can slew to an object immediately, perhaps do a closed loop slew to it, and get going. But of course, this is with the iPad. This is very nice for daytime solar observing or viewing. Perhaps when you're done looking at the sun, you want to slew to Mars or something, and maybe you've got a side saddle optical telescope or any number of reasons, but it's very useful. Thank you.